Buenas tardes a todos, bienvenidos a Sports Business Meeting. Soy Miquel López Egea, director de Palco 23, un medio de comunicación que, como sabéis, está especializado en generar información económica de valor para todos los profesionales del sector del deporte. Dentro de esta misión, desde hace ya mucho tiempo, impulsamos también informes y estudios y espacios como este, una jornada de reflexión en la que nos proponemos ayudar a generar debate en torno a los retos del futuro de este negocio. Comenzamos hoy la cuarta edición de la jornada, tal como hicimos en 2020, en un formato digital, y después de darle una nueva vuelta al esquema del año pasado. De la mano del Ayuntamiento de Barcelona, la Liga y Mundo Deportivo, a lo largo de los próximos 4 días vamos a desarrollar esta jornada en formato digital. Vosotros en vuestras casas y nosotros y parte de los ponentes en el escenario del Museu Olímpic de Barcelona. Como veréis, el programa se estructurará a través de 9 entrevistas con personas claves del sector, empresarios, directivos y expertos a los que les planteamos el reto de repensar el negocio del deporte. Esperamos que disfrutéis, que reflexionéis mucho y que toméis muchas notas a lo largo de estos 4 días. Cedo ahora la palabra a David Escudé, concejal de Deportes del Ayuntamiento de Barcelona, que realizará la apertura oficial de la jornada.
Pues muy bien, muchas gracias. La verdad que es un auténtico honor y un auténtico placer poder estar este ratito aquí, compartirlo con vosotros y dar la bienvenida y, en todo caso, bautizar de nuevo esta maravillosa iniciativa de Palco 23. Yo creo que en estos momentos durante la pandemia y también post-pandemia, iniciativas como estas yo creo que son no bienvenidas, sino absolutamente necesarias. Hablan de replantear, yo creo que es un término absolutamente imprescindible y ligado a lo que es nuestro sector deportivo. Aquí en el Ayuntamiento de Barcelona se consideró que el deporte podía ser uno de los motores de recuperación económica de la ciudad, y en eso estamos trabajando, que se nos considere, se nos vea no como un pequeño ámbito no profesional de la actividad física, sino todo lo contrario, se vea el deporte en toda su magnitud y también, evidentemente, como fuente de recuperación económica, como fuente de recuperación de empleo, evidentemente al lado de lo que nos hace absolutamente diferentes, que es esta capacidad de resiliencia, de reinventarnos, como se llaman las jornadas, en uno de los peores momentos de la historia para nuestra actividad, ¿no? Es por ello que estamos muy interesados en seguir con las jornadas, de ver qué es lo que se plantea y sobre todo de mirar hacia el futuro. Tenemos una oportunidad, como pasa en cualquier momento de crisis, también se tiene que aprovechar como un punto de inflexión, como oportunidad para hacernos presentes, para estar ahí, para manifestar que el deporte no es solo fuente de salud, sino también fuente de progreso y fuente de recuperación en todo su esplendor, y que afecte evidentemente a todo el ámbito de nuestra población. Así que simplemente desearos muy buen trabajo, porque vuestro trabajo y de vuestro trabajo también dependerá el futuro de nuestro sector deportivo. Así que muchas gracias y buen trabajo.
Muchas gracias, señor Escudé. Ahora sí, empezamos. ¿Y si los niños ya no quieren ver el fútbol? ¿Y si los gimnasios se instalan en las casas? ¿Y si no es posible volver a llenar los pabellones? ¿Y si el deporte se enfrenta a nuevas amenazas más allá de la pandemia? Estas son algunas de las preguntas que nos hacemos en esta edición de Sports Business Meeting, en la que confiamos que, como el año pasado, haya mucha participación. Os animo por ello a dejar vuestros comentarios y preguntas en el chat para que, en las diferentes entrevistas que hagamos en directo, podamos transmitir vuestras preguntas a los entrevistados. Además, si os apetece, os animo a comentar en redes sociales a través del hashtag SBM2021 Sports Business Meeting o mediante la plataforma B+. Pasamos ya a la primera entrevista de la jornada. Os dejo con la conversación que mantuvieron hace unos días mi compañera Iria Pérez Gestal, coordinadora de Cinnamon News, grupo editor de Palco 23, con un ejecutivo de una de las empresas que está revolucionando la forma de ver deportes. Farhan Ahmed es director de alianzas estratégicas de Twitch, donde ha trabajado desde 2017 en su sede en Londres, antes como responsable de alianzas en la división de póker. Anteriormente lideró la estrategia de redes sociales en PokerStars y también trabajó como coordinador de captación de fondos en Oxfam. Ahmed es graduado en Historia Moderna por la Universidad de Oxford, Reino Unido.
Well, hello, Farhan. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
So just to start off the conversation about sports entertainment, how do you feel it has changed in recent years?
Yeah, sure. I think we've seen a number of growing sports content trends on our service. The primary one is we're seeing more and more content being created around what we call sports talk content. So this is live interactive content around perhaps breaking news or sports matches. So this doesn't necessarily have the right within that content, but it's more a kind of a means for communities to have conversations around various sporting moments. We're also seeing what I like to call kind of major creator events, which clearly are kind of focused on sports. So the biggest non-gaming stream you've ever had actually on Twitch was Ibai's La Velada del Año. I hope I pronounced that right. Which was great. Which was a kind of a boxing event with significant kind of personalities within Spain competing against each other. There was significant kind of marketing campaigns behind it. There was hype within the community. So I think that's quite an interesting trend. These are sporting events. They're not professionalized in that way. This isn't the best boxers competing against each other, but still see significant kind of viewership. And then lastly, I think we're seeing more and more kind of traditional sports organizations delve into kind of sports content on Twitch. So whether that be kind of La Liga opening up their own channel and streaming a combination of kind of highlights, or in some cases actually live matches and kind of collaboration with Movistar or Media Pro. Or it's the kind of the NBA kind of streaming international international friendlies for the basketball team. So we are seeing kind of that emerge as well, which is interesting. And I think what adds to that is these organizations working with our existing talent to provide them with unique opportunities and experiences. So in the case of La Liga, actually working with creators like Ibai or TV and actually they're able to stream the matches, incorporate their commentary within the traditional broadcast. So these traditional organizations creating opportunities for our endemic creators seems to be a growing trend, and is also candidly something which really excites us, because it's providing better experiences and great value for our creators.
That was actually my next question. What do you think is the biggest disruption that Twitch brings to the sports entertainment industry?
Well, I think the consumption habits on Twitch are potentially quite innovative in that Twitch is all around kind of active and dynamic conversation. It's not kind of like a passive viewership experience. So the ability for the audience to connect directly with the creator and to kind of experience something together in a live environment, which I think synergizes very well with sports and the kind of the moments that occurs within sports, I think works really well. And Twitch as a service is a product that's been built around live entertainment. So that's really our bread and butter. So I think this emergence of fans and fan communities, and the idea that as long as you have a microphone, if you have a microphone and a webcam, you yourself can become a sports broadcaster, and you can talk about something that you love and share it with kind of like-minded people and grow a community around that. Fits into the model that we have as a service, and also I think is something we seem to see more of within sports, although I'd say it's still quite early days, which I think is quite exciting as well.
It's still early, as you say, but do you think there'll be room for, classical media, traditional media like TV or radio? Can they, coexist with the new ways of content?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, what's pleasing to see when we see more kind of traditional organizations lean in is they see it typically as a way to kind of go a new audience and get exposure to new types of communities, which they don't necessarily get already. I think we are actually seeing that already. So it's not like there's this big divide, and there's many ways to kind of access the Twitch community. So we do have radio shows on Twitch where it is the kind of the more, there is a webcam so you can actually see what's going on, but the output is very similar to what you would expect if you were listening to the radio show, just with added visuals. So there's that way, and you can look to grow your community as a content creator yourself, if you wish. And then there's this additional way where you actually work with the talent and the creators that we have on our service. And an advantage of that is it means you can you can access an existing community. So it's not like you're starting your Twitch channel from scratch. You are already working with a creator who has an existing community, who understands how to communicate with that community and the authenticity that goes with that. And often that meets the kind of the objectives of these organizations, because they're typically looking for, it's typically more an awareness or reach play, in which case working with an existing creator can make a lot of sense.
But can big TV and radio corporations learn to do that as well?
So could you repeat that question?
Yeah, if do you think the traditional media corporations can learn to do the things Twitch is bringing?
I guess it's an interesting question. I think it probably goes back to what their ultimate objectives really are. As I said, Twitch is a service built around kind of live, community-driven entertainment. So that's really at the core of our service, and we look to grow and inspire and help these creators make a living, whereas I think traditional media may have slightly different objectives. They're not looking perhaps to service a wide variety of creators in sports and outside of it as well. But I think when it comes to the content itself, the kind of the type of formats, the interactivity elements, the ways that you can kind of generate community, that may be that there may be more kind of synergies there when it comes to the strategic objectives.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned several Spanish examples before. What's the Spanish market like in terms of sports entertainment consumption?
Well, it's so my role is across EMEA, although I also look at kind of global markets too. It's very clear that the Spanish audience and Spanish communities really love sports content, and it's certainly a key market for us, and I'm sure will continue to be. We have, there's a lot of innovation that comes out of the Spanish market. So I mentioned Ibai already, and the boxing event. There's also the Balloon World Cup, which kind of became this almost global success, really, but originated on Ibai's channel, which is really pleasing. And then there's a number of kind of agencies that work with some of our top creators to kind of really support that content. Then we have a growing number of kind of journalists as well on our service who have experience within the sports industry. I think can bring through their contacts, can actually put a very compelling content proposition in place. So we have people like Ciro Lopez, Gerald Romero, Ruben Martin. They're all at the forefront of the kind of the innovation. We work very closely with our Chiringuito TV as well, who produce a number of different kind of formats throughout the day. All of it again is around kind of like the sports talk element. You know, they're talking about the various kind of events, moments, and typically those creators are all talking about football, but it's not exclusive to football. On Twitch, we have, you know, creators creating content around motorsports, basketball. In other markets, it's beach volleyball. So it can be a wide variety of things, and kind of goes back to this point that I think Twitch allows you to kind of grow a community around a passion point of yours. And I think certainly within Spain, it's clear that people want to talk about sports. There's a lot of opinions out there, and this is a place where you can kind of share that passion and grow a community, and from the creator's perspective, hopefully monetize that as well, so you can kind of sustain what you're doing longer term.
Would you say sports it's a good product to reach younger audiences compared say to music or other kinds of content? Yeah,
so I mean we have a focus on growing kind of sports content. We do see it as an area which is synergistic with the existing audiences that we have on our service, and that has been met out by kind of surveys, and when we speak to both creators and audiences alike, and it's clear that, you know, Twitch at its root and its foundations has been a gaming service, but you know, we're more than 10 years old now, and there's a wide array of content on our service which may not be gaming, but has resonance with kind of gaming communities, and that live experience that we built up can work very well in communities outside of gaming too.
What would you say are the pros and cons of sports versus other types of content?
Oh, that's a good question. I think you know, I think that the pros, or certainly what seems to work well for creators, is that sports often is quite visceral. Like, you know, there is a community that you can tap into, and well, if you break that down a bit more, let's just look at football. You know, if you're a fan of a particular club, there'll often be a natural kind of audience that you can find and grow, because it will be people who are like-minded, who support the club, and also those who enjoy the schadenfreude of your club not doing so well as well. So I think there's a kind of a natural kind of community fit. It does kind of fit into the kind of the live interactive entertainment model that works really well on Twitch. I think what's a challenge for kind of sports creators generally, and it's something I would I'm keen to kind of convey to the industry, is I think that it's still quite early, but what it is that the creators are doing, and what it is that visually appears on stream, I think still requires a little bit of work. And in gaming, there's a much easier kind of fit between your content output, right? Like in essence, you're streaming the video game. Visually, it's going to be very appealing because video games typically are, and they're built for audience consumption in mind. Within sports, it's much more of a challenge because, yes, we do have live rights, and of course that makes it easier. But when there isn't, what is it that creators are capturing? What are the assets that are using? And I do think that it may take some time, but I think as the sports industry sees opportunity with working with these particular creators, those kind of content opportunities, and hopefully will increase. And that I think would have a profound effect, I think, on this kind of next generation of sports creator.
Does that also mean that the companies that are in charge of recording the game, for example, need to adapt to Twitch, because it's a different way of, it's not the same, probably the same content you need for TV, the same you're gonna need in Twitch? Yeah, that's
absolutely right. I think, and we are seeing like shoots of this, and it's happening in Spain, which is great. So La Liga and Media Pro are working with Ruben Martin, and he can actually show kind of highlights of matches the day after on his channel, which is quite innovative. And but it's clearly something that really elevates his stream and what sports creators can do. So I think it's looking at things like that and how you unlock those creative opportunities, and completely understand that there is a business side to it and revenue models. So it's wise careful with the kind of the positioning that it doesn't necessarily need to be the live rights, but are there ways that pieces of content which may not necessarily be as valuable to you as an organization, but actually could really enhance a Twitch creator's stream, or assets that you may have, or access to data which can help build that kind of compelling content.
You reach mainly young audiences. Is there room for Twitch to reach older generations as well?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we do have, at the core, our demographic is young, between kind of the ages of 16 to 34. But we do have creators in a wide variety of backgrounds and demographics on our service. I think from the creator perspective, that's absolutely fine. I think when it comes to audience, it would be, well, if you're looking to kind of reach a more traditional audience, how do you bring them? How do you bring them to your Twitch channel? How do you bring them to your community? Are they all aware of your channel? So I think that would be the challenge to that. But it's a very entertaining way of kind of consuming content, both within sports and generally. So I think I don't see that as being a barrier. I think it's just the kind of the awareness play that would need to be bridged.
For decades, almost, watching sports has been all about watching the live game. Do you think with these new platforms like this is going to change? Like, all the types of content, not necessarily live, are gonna be more relevant?
Yeah. So Twitch is all about live. So the
real game, like the live game, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I think we definitely see with kind of watch-alongs, which are a prominent kind of content format that sports creators do on our service, and seems to be very popular with the community. There is an element of a second screen experience with that. So it may be that you're watching the match, and then you're also kind of you may have the kind of the Twitch creators commentary on, and you're kind of interacting with the chat as well. So it kind of adds to that kind of that fan community and the interaction that I was referring to earlier. But then there were other areas, where when it's kind of preview or kind of post match, the kind of the digesting of what's happened, or when kind of the Superliga was kind of came out, like everyone wanted to go online and Twitch and trying to talk about it with their community. So I think it comes back to that ability for creators to kind of become, Twitch almost democratizes kind of the sports experience, right? And I think that will be at the heart of the of kind of sports talk content moving forward. But yes, obviously, I still think the live matches inevitably will play a massive part within sports, for both audiences and rights holders and entities as well. But so what I see sports talk, I see is very much additive to that. It's something a bit new, something that can work on a service such as ourselves, and it can work across a wide array of kind of creators and communities.
Mm-hmm. What can football or basketball as a sector do to reach younger audiences?
Well, I guess it depends who's representing football and basketball within that example. I think I'll kind of pivot back to what we see, what I was referring to earlier, really, on our service. I think if there's a willingness for the kind of the traditional organizations to kind of lean in more on services such as ourselves, provide creators with unique opportunities, and also if there's ways for them to access something more broadly, can a whole array of Twitch creators actually incorporate assets or a press conference or things like that within their stream to kind of help their content. I think that's a really useful first step in kind of building the relationships with the kind of the communities that we have on our service, and the likely demographics that these organizations are looking to kind of reach. I think I mentioned kind of creative events earlier. I think what's really interesting about that is we typically think of sports, and it's often the most competitive, you know, it's the best, it's the most professional, it's the most competitive, and of course that clearly has its place. But what I like quite seeing about the kind of the creative events is that it's not the best versus the best competing. It's community versus community, or creators with a following versus creators with a following. And I think, you know, like traditional sports can clearly embrace that as perhaps something that they haven't necessarily considered too much. This kind of doesn't need to be the most professionalized, but if it's put in the right hands of the right kind of creators, you can still drive really significant audience and hype, and it still be a really popular activation.
Mm-hmm. How do you think traditional sports and esports will coexist in the future?
Well, I believe they do now, really, in some ways. I know many kind of sports brands have looked to kind of grow their own esports teams. There's been kind of sponsorship activations within the various sector. I think what ties both sports and esports together is this kind of professionalized, competitive element to it, which has the best versus the best competing against each other. And you know, there can be quite significant sums of money at play, and teams all kind of competing against each other. So there's clearly synergies within that, and I think clearly as well within the audience side. I think one thing just generally is what makes a good esports and how you grow esports is very difficult. It's you know, it's almost like saying, how do I create a new sport? You know, like it takes an awful lot of thinking, and you need to kind of think about what your ultimate objectives are. And Twitch is typically used by many organizations as a good benchmark for whether a game would be a good esport or not, because you can see the kind of the audiences that watch that particular game. So I think that's something that sports still needs to you know, if they are looking to create a kind of a sports esport, if that term exists, is, you know, what is that experience? What is that viewership experience? What game is it that they're using? But you know, it's really encouraging. La Liga have started their own esports now. Formula One, of course, have their esports series, and you know, you're seeing a kind of a new professional gaming creator coming out, which kind of coexists with the more traditional sports offerings.
Mm-hmm. And besides these, say, collaborations or synergies between the two sectors, what do you think traditional football can learn from the esports industry?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, sure. What can football, for example, learn from esports industry?
I think I think it's a difficult question to answer, because I think it kind of goes back to what are the objectives, and you know, football's been around a lot longer than esports, but I think, yeah, so I would look at what the objectives are in terms of what you're looking to do. It's clear that esports can tap into a young, engaged audience, and it's clear that you are able to get a sense of what will work and what won't work by the kind of the popularity of the game, as well as the audiences and fans kind of gravitating towards particular kind of teams. So that should sound fairly familiar, I think, to a lot of kind of football organizations as well. But then I think the challenge is, well, you know, how do you I think it's almost like it's a attention market, right? Like there's so many different things that audiences can consume now, different types of entertainment, that it's how do you make your offering distinct enough, fresh enough, engaging enough for a viewer to choose that versus something else.
Mm-hmm. And which sport or competition would you say is doing it especially well in terms of creating content?
Well, I think we've certainly got a few examples. I mean, I think with what La Liga are doing around kind of La Liga casters, I think is really innovative, and just enabling a number of Twitch creators to kind of have pre, post, and watch along kind of content, and incorporate the kind of the warm ups and then the post match and highlights as well. I think that's really successful. We've had organizations kind of stream live rights events on our service, which has gone particularly well. So we've had a kind of Formula One kind of stream Grand Prix on our service, and that I think they were very pleased that the co-streaming model which we enabled, so this ability for other Twitch creators to stream the content as opposed to it just being on their channel, just really allowed them to kind of access new audiences. And then I think, you know, we have agencies in the space as well now who are almost are buying the rights and enabling content creators to stream them. So, you know, the Ligue 1 is a good example, especially when, you know, Messi went over to PSG. The ability for Spanish creators, so who clearly have an affiliation still with Messi, to actually be able to stream those matches on their channels. So it is also quite special.
Mm-hmm. Well, final question. This edition of the Sports Business Meeting is all about rethinking the sports industry. How should we rethink the sports, the audiovisual product, the entertainment side of the sports industry?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, I guess my main message would be, you know, like definitely have a look at kind of the new behaviors and ways of consuming sports content and what creators are doing within this space. Because it is quite different. So if you've not gone into Twitch Sports and just had a look at Twitch content, that would be a good place to start. And I'm sure the community can explain things in much more succinct ways than I can. And then I think it's you know, obviously taking into kind of commercial considerations into account, but are there ways that actually you can kind of look to support this emerging content, activate within that space? You know, you could start your own channel yourself and do this kind of this conversational talk channel. We see that with El Chiringuito, with Deportes Cuatro as well in Spain. Or it could be that you activate via the existing creators that we have. That again just ultimately depends on what you're looking to achieve, right? So I think that the clarity on that is not always easy, but it's fundamental, I think. So that should be a good basis to start. And, you know, as a service, we are looking to support as many kind of new entities within the space as possible. Both from a kind of a creator and a business perspective too. So there's always that support there if required.
Wonderful. Well, with that recommendations, we'll leave it here. Thank you very much, Farhan. It's been a pleasure having you here.
No, lovely to be here. Nice to meet you all, and that was useful.